The real reason behind Muhammad Mokaev's UFC release has now been revealed. So as we know, Muhammad Mokaev was let go by the UFC following a controversial string of events leading up to his fight against Mokaev at UFC 304. At the time, the UFC didn't give a specific reason as to why Mokaev was released by the UFC. Since then, a UFC insider has came out in a recent interview and claimed that Mokaev was released by the UFC for mistreating UFC staff behind the scenes. Just before we get into that interview, we'll listen to what Dana White had to say at the UFC 304 post-fight press conference, because he did actually allude to why Mokaev was released by the UFC. Here's what Dana had to say.
Now, what did you make of the Mokaev and Manel Kape drama? Like, you know, they had that run-in at the PI, they had that run-in at the hotel.
There was so much bad shit that happened in the behind the scenes with that thing, and yeah, not good.
Mokaev said that his contract is up, and he made this interesting remark that said someone at the UFC told him to stop shooting for these takedowns so much, and maybe he'll get this contract that he wants. Is that true, and what do you think he'll bring him back?
Yeah, that's what we tell guys. We tell guys how to fight and tell them what we've been doing this for a long fucking time. I'm sure one of the matchmakers probably said something to him or whatever, but yeah, the matchmakers aren't big fans of his for many different reasons. And not just there's a lot of people who shoot takedowns in this business. You know, a lot of guys that fight with that type of style, but it's a lot more than just that.
But Mokaev is the guy that you'd want to bring back to the UFC because he said his contract is totally done now.
Yeah, he is. He's under contract. He's not under contract anymore.
Okay, but would you be interested in keeping him around in the fall?
I think the PFL is going to get a great undefeated guy.
Really?
Good luck to him.
Now, the media speculated several reasons as to why Mokaev was released by the UFC. Number 1, Mokaev's hotel brawl with Kape in Manchester. Number 2, his performance against Kape. Number 3, Mokaev claimed UFC matchmakers don't like his wrestling, and prior to UFC 304, they hinted they may not re-sign him because of his wrestling. But as we saw there from Dana White, the reason Mokaev was released from the UFC wasn't because of his wrestling and was due to a series of events behind the scenes. And in a recent interview, UFC flyweight Steve Erceg exposed this situation and revealed the reason Mokaev was released by the UFC is because he was mistreating UFC staff behind the scenes. In a recent interview with Middle Easy, Erceg said Mokaev has a coward mentality and was disrespectful towards UFC staff behind the scenes. Erceg said he competed on the same card as Mokaev and noticed Mokaev is a little entitled and thinks he's very important. Here's what Steve Erceg had to say.
I think a lot of people expected whoever won your fight was going to fight the winner of this Muhammad Mokaev and Manel Kape fight. Obviously, that's pretty big news right now with Muhammad Mokaev getting released. Just first and foremost, before we talk about the fight, how surprised were you that the UFC decided to not re-sign Mokaev after that win over Manel Kape?
Yeah, I was very surprised, but I think it's like a cool little precedent to set. You can't go around not only starting fights and jumping other fighters. Like, if he did it one-to-one, like face to face, it's like one thing. Like, you probably shouldn't do it before a fight anyway, jeopardize the fight, but more understandable. But like getting a photo and then sucker punching him and getting your team in, and that's like unacceptable. It's coward mentality, I think. And then the way he treats people, I don't know if fans get to see it, but I don't know, he just seems like he's a little entitled and thinks he's very important, which I don't particularly like, and obviously the UFC didn't like, so hopefully he grows from here and learns a lesson.
Is that stuff that you've seen or just stuff you've heard about how he treats people? Is that something that's sort of like common knowledge amongst the fighters in your division?
I don't know if it's common knowledge. I saw it when I fought on the same card as him, just the way he was treating the nutrition team and that sort of thing from the UFC, and just like little things that's like disrespectful that, yeah, I thought was odd, but he's a young kid. Hopefully he'll learn from there.
Just before we continue, guys, last month one of my YouTube videos got 647,000 views and made $898 in 24 hours. This weekend I'm hosting a free YouTube workshop sharing my viral YouTube strategy that allowed me to achieve these results. Click the link in the description of this video and you can access the workshop for absolutely free. So as Steve Erceg said there, the reason Mokaev was released by the UFC is because he was mistreating UFC staff behind the scenes. The UFC didn't like it and they decided to let him go. And just to recap on what Dana White said, he kind of alluded to this at the UFC 304 post-fight press conference. and he said there were issues behind the scenes. The UFC matchmakers didn't like him and they decided to let him go. Now, a lot of people are blaming Dana White for this, for not keeping Mokaev on the UFC roster. Now, I just want to defend Dana White in this situation because a couple of years ago, UFC flyweight Jake Hadley was in the exact same situation as Muhammad Mokaev. The UFC matchmakers dislike Hadley, but Dana White saved his career. So prior to Hadley's debut on Dana White's Contender Series, UFC matchmakers instructed Dana White not to sign Hadley due to him missing weight and mistreating UFC staff during the Contender Series fight week. Despite this, Dana ignored the matchmakers' instructions and still signed Jake Hadley.
We're going to bring Hadley in here even though he missed weight.
So when I left the back room, my instructions were not to sign this guy. And according to Hunter, Sean and Mick stormed out of the room when I did and took off here tonight. So they're not happy about it. I just have a gut feeling that this kid has something special. And I broke all my own rules. So broke my own rules and didn't listen to what they said. So hopefully I'm right on this, and this kid doesn't make a dickhead out of me.
So Dana White doesn't necessarily always listen to the matchmakers because he is the boss, he is the captain of the ship, and if there is a talented fighter on the roster, no matter what they do, if they are worth saving, Dana White will save their career. But Dana White didn't save Muhammad Mokaev's career. So Muhammad Mokaev obviously did something bad behind the scenes, but as we know, the UFC matchmakers do not like it when fighters mistreat people behind the scenes, and this is why they let Muhammad Mokaev go. And it must have been quite serious because Dana White didn't try to save him, he didn't try to defend him, he literally just let him go. And it's pretty crazy because Muhammad Mokaev is one of the most talented flyweights on the roster, no matter what people think. He's got a big fan base, he's championship material, but Dana White just let him go at the drop of a hat, so it must have been quite serious whatever happened behind the scenes.